Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. I am so honored and grateful that you are tuning in, but I have to ask for your help. I'm going to pull an NPR. If you'd like to help the show, you can donate to the show at emmettmuckles.com/donate, or just visit emmettmuckles.com. Follow the link in the menu to the donate page where you can make a donation of your choice. Thank you.
Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with Emmett Muckles, Emmett and Friends. You know, if you'd like to help out the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast, and I always say this is not about money, but, you know, it takes resources to run things. You can go to emmettmuckles.com and find the donate page. When you find the donate page, donate what you like. It just helps to keep this going and gives me resources so I can book these wonderful guests like you've been seeing. And remember, you are a billionaire. 30 days after your inception, 2 became 4, 4 became 8, 8 became 16. At the 30-day mark, you were 8 billion cells and you hadn't even set foot on the planet. So why are you tripping about this construct that is called money? If I give you $1 billion, you may be broke tomorrow because you don't know how to handle the energy. That's some food to think about. Anywho, moving on. Today we're going to get down to, let's find our path. Let's move forward. Let's get down and look at the visionary aspects of life. Who's going to help me with that? John Folak. What's up, my brother?
Hey there. How are you?
I'm good, man. You know, you've written a series of books, and I've gone to your website. I checked out your videos. I like what you are talking about in relationship to consciousness. And you and I are on similar paths in that we have looked at what it is, and we found out that the firmware that we have been given has a virus. Mm-hmm. And we don't even know that our system has been corrupted. But let me go back to the question that I ask all of my guests: what got you to now?
I suppose that's a question that we could all start at various points, but more or less I could just start it in short with where I started writing my series of books, and that was essentially getting my call to adventure. At the time, I was just fresh out of high school, going into the basic curriculum of 2-year college just because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and and I had no real good ideas, so it seems like culture kind of pushes you through that funnel, and I was frustrated with it. It felt meaningless, and one day I sunk into a spontaneous meditation, if you will. I didn't even know what that was at the time, but that was some kind of direction or my call to adventure that said, do this. And it essentially instructed me to pursue aviation, to become a pilot. So I did that with my life, and it took a while, but eventually that led me to the next thing and the next and so forth and so on. And then, of course, you start to see the cycle and some of the common themes of it. And you begin to realize that you're following something of a blueprint when you continually take your calls to adventure and proceed forward into more and more evolved and growth-centric sort of worldviews, and you begin to see that this is the process to be involved in. And I think when we're sitting down and comparing with one another, we're all doing the same sort of process. We're just talking about it and how it's different through our specific incarnations.
So with that, we were talking earlier, and you saying, like, you know, you came up in Chicago, which is like the Rust Belt, not the most intuitive people in their being. You know, the Midwest it's a certain kind of place. They're just, you know, due to the cold weather, it changes your psyche. You know, most of us were equatorial at some time, and we began to migrate out. And that cold changes you, but it also distances you from reality in a sense and each other. When you start on your journey, did you have to leave behind or investigate so that you knew what to leave behind, some of the ideologies that you picked up coming from this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that process begins to happen when you leave. I think both parts of your question are tied together there. You don't really know what you don't know beforehand, but you might hear that call, and it might be strong enough where it's undeniable. And that certainly was the case for me. So that then led me into the next stage, which was physically leaving Chicago. I ended up pursuing aviation, in my case, at the southern portion of the state, which was geographically beautiful in Illinois. And so that did change my environment. Of course, my mindset began to change. And from there, that just keeps going. And it's only until you pursue that for a while and have some data to reflect on that you actually see, exactly as you said, how fraught with holes your previous worldviews were and how inadequate your previous models were for the new information and the new space that you now occupy.
So with that, you did some, you went on a visionary quest. And I like this because it's now becoming more acceptable in our society to go out from within. And what I mean by that is you look at the world from within versus just looking out. And that's a psychedelics hero's journey. By the traveling nobody. How did you come up with that?
The entire title itself came to me after an ayahuasca ceremony that I went to in Costa Rica. And that was after I had some experience specifically with the mushroom and diving in with that for purposes of growth and understanding and such. And a couple months after my first ayahuasca ceremony, I ended up where I now live in Austin, just randomly at that point. And I had a lot of time off work at that point in time. I was working a job that gave me weeks off, so I was just exploring the city. And I didn't have a lot to do, read and reflect. And I suppose the natural outpouring for me became writing. And so the title just came sort of out of nowhere. I met someone there at the Costa Rican ayahuasca ceremony who recommended Joseph Campbell to me, who authored A Hero with 1,000 Faces. And that essentially is the blueprint of the heroic cycle, the 17-stage cycle that Campbell put forth. And I began looking at it, just the idea. I found it fascinating. And then I thought, well, what would be a better model to put your story to than this? It seems like it is a formula for an archetypal story that rings true with many of us. So I began to do that. And before I knew it, it took form into the shape of this writing process that gave me what to do next. And that's all I feel like I could ever ask for, what to do next. And so then I just continued that process from there.
How many times have you been initiated? And the reason I'm asking this is because you said ayahuasca, right?
Yeah.
You know, I've never done it, but I can imagine if I fell asleep, went into a dimension that I'm not familiar with. You know, the first time you go into that, it's like, whoa, what is this? What's left, what's right, what's up, what's down, what's the references that I can, package this to? Did you subsequently follow up, like did you have one experience or multiple experiences with this?
Well, specifically with ayahuasca, that first ceremony I went to, there were 2 instances of you drinking the drink. Before that, though, like I said, I had explored the mushroom hard and heavy and solo in that space you sort of describe about 25, 30 times. So I wasn't quite coming into it with absolutely no expectation of what was going to be delivered. So that was helpful to just ease general anxiety and nerves. I would say as a general message across the board to help with that process, to help ease the fear, is just to look into it. It's as simple as that. And if anyone does so, they'll begin to very quickly see that these things are not toxic whatsoever to the body. And then the natural fear might become, well, what about psychologically, as you just mentioned? Yeah. What if I'm in this new space? I don't know what to do. I don't know where I am. I don't know how to navigate. I suppose what I would say for that is that's your sort of personal call that would get you there. If you don't feel that it's necessary to go pursue an ayahuasca ceremony, then just don't. It's not a thing. But if you start to hear that call, I suppose you do end up putting your faith, if you will, into the process. And as far as I can tell, we are a reflection of the process that is coherent, that's structured, and is intelligent. So if that is true, if we are a reflection of that infinite intelligence, you'll be able to work it out. It won't be a problem.
The system kind of, after the 60s and into the 70s, a lot of this was just saying, oh, that's hippie stuff. And because we were on the precipice of change, but then there is an opposing force that does not want change. It likes the status quo. And we keep ending kind of back into the same kind of matrix, for a lack of a better word. But we're going through a change now. I'm seeing a cosmic change. A long time ago, and I've said this on the show, is that we're entering the age of Aquarius. Here's the cool thing about the age of Aquarius. It's a feminine age. Most of the past ones have been very masculine. So we just build shit and tear shit up. But I'm seeing how, everybody's getting into their yin and yang of their masculine and feminine and exploring that. Do you think exploring these or taking this psychedelic spaceship, as you say in the book, is beneficial for the growing body, for the earth in general? Like, should everybody have this experience, or should a certain percentage of the populace have this experience?
Yeah, that's a tough one, again, because I can only kind of speak from my angle on that. I undeniably heard the call, and it was, in short, a response to my life falling apart. So I was carrying a bunch of insufficient models. I was going through a heartbreak, and I was an alcoholic and didn't even know it, which is the worst kind, I suppose. And so I realized my life was not all that it could be, certainly, and that I was suffering, and that was undeniable. I think suffering is undeniable pain. So I began literally just looking, how do I correct this naturally?
Yeah.
And for me, that process brought me to the mushroom. And then it took me about 1.5 years of researching it. And I ended up growing my own. I never would have been able to trust someone to just give me something. It had to be...
Don't want to get dosed.
Yeah, right. I mean, it had to be just a process that came from me. So that was the path I pursued. Now, in terms of whether or not that was beneficial for me at pulling me out of that depression and that alcoholism and that materialism, well, absolutely. My life has since been dedicated to sharing what I've learned and what I've distilled from that space, because I kind of feel like if you're to go out into the world, into the unknown, and find some navigational tools and aids that work, they are not just going to work for you if they're like the eternally true ones. They're going to work for anyone who were to employ them. And so I kind of think that the responsibility of those who find such things is to spread it to their fellow men, to sort of end unnecessary suffering. And just to concisely answer your question, should everyone have that experience? Probably not. I mean, I don't think the psychedelics are for everyone, but I do think that everyone has their call to adventure in life, which is, if you will, a call to their highest and best self, and that would be that particular person's thumbprint upon reality that could be good for them, for their tribe, for society, and have reverberations there from that point. And if you see that, or if you see a pathway to that, you owe it to yourself and to the world at large to explore it.
So were the changes immediate after you, or how do I want to put this? You had been going down the journey in kind of Western ways or Northern Western ways, and then you went to Southern Western ways in Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. What was the profound change and the timeline when experiencing the ayahuasca experience? You know, what was communicated to you that you get, oh, really? That's it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I have a concise answer to it as well, although as out there as it might be. I first went to ayahuasca about 1.5 years after exploring the mushroom. And my work with the mushroom primarily was by myself, alone, dark, and without any distractions, to just let it show me what it needed to. And that was essentially the intention. So one way or the other, after doing this for a while, I asked it to see the all, to see everything. I wanted to know
Ooh.
what is base level nature of reality, suchness. What is it? I'd like to know. And they showed me a representation of this figure 8, basically. So the infinity symbol. It was clear atop the void of space, and it was blue, I recall, and I just watched it. And the representation of it was that is intelligence feeding into itself infinitely. And the mushroom went on to say, this isn't us. This isn't our take on it. We are a branch of evolutionary life, not dissimilar from humans in that way, that we are a branch of evolutionary life, but this exists outside or inside, however you want to put it. But the representation of the intelligence exists, basically. So I thought, and it didn't have a lot of emotion behind it. So anyway, I came back from that trip, and I didn't know what to do with that information. I really didn't. So I thought to myself, well, if you were researching any topic and you asked somebody something about it, you would verify their perspective. You don't just take it at face value. So what's the difference with the plants? You got to verify. So that was basically my call to ayahuasca. I wanted to check what the mushroom said. And in short, it showed me essentially the same basic idea. However, it was fully imbued with love, and that was all the difference in the world for me. I suppose, in a nutshell, that was what propelled me to write. When I just felt the absolute reality of that beneficent sort of love radiating from that space, I then knew this must be shared.
So that's what, and I was watching one of your videos, and this kind of just stood out to me, where you came to the reference that I use, which is from the Bible. But when you said this, I went right to that reference in my head, which is I am. So how did you come to that, with the infinity symbol and the I am joining together?
Really, in that ayahuasca ceremony, that's what it was. I mean, it was certainly like that exists. As I said, the intelligence is a very real way that this thing operates. But in a nutshell, you really did encapsulate it well there. I suppose I was still divorced from me being a part of it when I was first shown that by the mushroom. Yeah. And then with ayahuasca, it was somewhat clear that you are it. The I am, I suppose, is clear. And that's a good way to put it biblically. I guess I hadn't previously exactly thought about that. But yeah, that was the sentiment that was certainly felt in some way. Absolutely.
Because when they ask God, like, who are you? God says, I am. And they're like, yeah, but no, you don't get it. I am. And, to really own that connects you with everything. In that space, understanding I am for how we interpret it, that lets you know you are everything. I am air. I am a molecule. I am with you. It just goes so deep. So putting all the information together, because, you probably had a stream of consciousness that was disjointed. There was a lot of information, and there was probably some information that you didn't have a name for. You didn't have an identifier for. And we think in this meat bag, like you said, we think in pictures. So if I say, I'm going to the store, you picture me leaving, and you picture the store, you probably picture a car. But if you start to explain some of this intelligence that we've not been privy to, what was your journey with that?
I came back from that ceremony, and I had a real good friend of mine for a long time from high school that was interested in hearing about it, and he had somewhat of an interest in the plant medicines. And so we sat down for lunch, and I laid all of this out on him. And now you got to remember, I didn't know at that point that the things I was saying and talking about would not be understood, because like you just said, and for the most part, when you describe where you've been, what you were doing, someone says, oh, okay, great. That's what you did. And they have a general idea of what it is that you're talking about. And so I guess that process I thought would just continue for me. I was too ignorant to understand that it's not going to continue. So I sat down with this poor soul, and I laid it all out for him. And you know what he said to me at the end of it?
What?
He said, it is as if you have just said nothing at all for the last hour. So I suppose in many ways that was the beginning of me realizing that for me, what I feel like my journey is in this world is to connect with people, this information, but I had to learn how to do it. And I suppose writing became my soul's preferred method of expression, if you will, because I could sit with it. I could take time and make sure that I put the most sculpted thing forth as was possible. And even now, of course, through conversation, you learn little tricks and tips that work to connect with the ideas. Because if you're not connecting, you're not communicating. And what's the point? I'm not trying to sit here on a platform just lecturing someone about some thing that they're not going to understand. That is not the point. The point is to connect with the information. So it's almost like if you've had these sorts of experiences or something along those lines, the real work isn't the knowledge of it or the space that you occupied per se in and of itself. Like, that's a reality, but the real work is connecting that to your fellow man, or at least those who would like to listen and hear what you have to say, for sure. So I suppose in many ways that's what you learn how to do, and at first you're just not going to know how to do that.
I like how you broke this down. So you said you said 1 trip, 4 stages of discovery. How did you break that down? Because, usually when you get this, so I wrote this book one time, and it was a stream of consciousness that was literally downloaded to me when I was at work. Mind you, I've been asking for it. I just didn't know when I didn't know it was actually going to happen. So I was sitting at this desk, and all of a sudden, boom, it was there. It was like dial-up. Somebody went click, and I went home and started writing for 2 weeks. Was this a similar thing, or did you have to parse it out? Did you have to say, write the whole thing and then, oh, this is too much. I need to introduce this and then go here and then go here? Or was it, all right, first you are going to do this. Then you are going to do this. Then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. What was the process for that?
It was the same as the process you just described. It is funny to hear you say that, because I think that is the impulse that the writer has within some of us. It is, you have to. It's not even that you want to or you would enjoy it. You have to. You have something in you, and it must come out. And that seems pretty generally across the board true of most writers or those who have something to say and need to write it out. So for me, with the Visionary Quest series, that came after my first book, and there was a month period, or 3 weeks for sure, where I just sat down and that's all I did. It was sort of a stream of consciousness thing. It had to come out of me. And coincidentally, or synchronistically enough, that happened to follow my second ayahuasca ceremony. So it was within a couple of months of that second one, and then that process just came over me. And of course, everything got out of my way for that to happen too. I was on the road a lot, working in an area of the country where I essentially couldn't work. I was mapping the terrain geographically in airplanes. That's the job I was doing at the time. And there was smoke all over. So I couldn't work because it was visual as pictures that we were taking. So I was just on the road, in the hotel, with nothing other to do than write. And I made sure that I did it. It was sort of like the universe gave me the space to do the thing that I know I needed to do. And I was grateful enough, I guess, that I was able to understand that and do what needed to happen.
All right. So quickly, we're going to go over the books. 1 trip, 4 stages. First, the organic spaceship opening the psychedelic door, which is Vision Quest 1. Then the digital motherboard, Love, Fear, and the Quest for Truth, which is Vision Quest 2. Looking at Vision Quest reminds me of the movie from the 80s, by the way.
Oh, I've not seen it. I'm totally unfamiliar.
It's extremely light version, but we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, number 3, Beneath the Surface, Trusting the Call to Adventure, Vision Quest 3. And then finally wrapping up is Unexplored Territory, The Search for Home, Vision Quest 4. Were you this guy before? I know you said you didn't know you were an alcoholic and you had some other issues in your life. Basically, you were an American. You're just the average person doing their thing and what you thought. What was unfolded to you? Did it say, all right, you were on a path, but now there's a different road coming for you?
It happened slowly but surely. With the first book, Psychedelic Hero's Journey, I just wrote it. I mean, I knew it needed to happen, and I put that out there, and it took me about 1.25 years to really complete it. And then after that, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I didn't think I was... I didn't necessarily think I was a writer per se. I just had to get it out, and I did. And so then after that, the universe just called me up. It really was a call to adventure. I got a Facebook message from someone that I met at the first ayahuasca ceremony I went to, and he said, hey, I'm aware of this traveling ayahuasca group within the United States. They go around to different states, and they're going to be near where you live. And this was someone I had never, I don't think, talked to at all since the first time. He just randomly messaged me. I said, thanks, man. I think I probably need to take the medicine in again and figure out the next thing to do. I did so. And then, as I was saying to you, within a couple months of that, it was very clear that I had to do that whole process again. And it started turning into these Visionary Quest books. Even though when I was writing those, I didn't know it was going to be a series of books. I had none of that planned. It just seemed to be in many ways that I would behave in accordance with what I thought would potentially further me in the world and expand my understanding. And many times that had to do with what the plants or mushrooms had suggested. And then from that, I observed the behavior as sort of like a third party and said to myself, this has been good. This has taken you from, like you were saying, that average American to something other that's not entirely undesirable. And I started essentially realizing that process of growth and evolution, and also understanding that I wanted to be a part of that as much as is possible. So I don't think it ever ends, but I wanted to push it basically more and more, and that just changes you profoundly and deeply, and it continues to advance the path, it seems.
So what else are you doing with the book? How can people connect with you? Because we're in an age where people are disconnected and they're searching for some kind of connection. That's why Instagram and all these things are so popular. People are becoming distant fans of people they may or may not have something in common with. So how can people find out more about you?
Yeah, just travelingnobody.net is my author website. There's contact forms on there, and that links to all of the books on Amazon, which are available in digital and paperback format. And honestly, I do feel like connection is one of the highest things in my personal hierarchy. That's what I enjoy doing. I mean, sitting down with people and talking about such things and just comparing our notes as cosmic journalists is something that I get the most fulfillment out of, I would say, in life. So go to the website. You could find me there. My email and such is all listed, and I'd love to start talking more and more to people about such things.
Awesome. You know, one thing that it really gets me is talking about ayahuasca. If you would have talked about this in the early 2000s, I'd say from 2005 and before, people were freaked out because, you know, these have been demonized, and or people get dosed with stuff and they don't come back. Their reality, they're just stuck in their meat bag till the meat bag, you know, meets its demise. Then they're free, but, you know, that connection is broken. A lot of people are fearful. What would you say to someone who's like, yeah, that sounds interesting, but that scares the living shit out of me?
Yeah. Which is totally reasonable. I mean, of course, like, yeah, I'm going to take this thing and it's going to take me to all these dimensions. What if I can't find my ticket back home? In my experience, you always find it. you come back. No, but to specifically address that, I would just say this. Like anything else, I mean, it's something that is worth exploring and just understanding what kind of data we have on it. When it comes to, say, the mushroom, psilocybin is the active drug in it, or DMT and ayahuasca, they're not physically harmful or toxic at all. So just understanding that should relieve some fear, but we're back to that psychological question. Well, what if I never come back? Start slow with the mushroom. I would recommend a very light dose, and that'll be about 4 hours of your time, and you're not going to leave your dimension. You're simply going to have what I have called a sort of instant Zen enlightenment sort of appreciation for everything, where you just simply think everything is beautiful. And the sense there is not that you're adding anything to your experience. This is very commonly reported, but that you're simply clarifying existence, which then would I think, if you feel the call, inspire the natural curiosity to want to keep unveiling, well, what other clarifications could I bring to my perception? And if that then is there, then just do a little bit more. I mean, for hard numbers on this, with the mushroom, just as an example, a dried gram of the mushroom would be like a fairly light dose. And what I have done in the past and recommended to people is start there for that Zen sort of appreciation. And then if you choose to pursue, I would just say basically double it. Go to 2 grams of dried. And that would be more like, I think, the typical dose a person would say that they tripped on would be something like that. And if you're then feeling the call to continue exploring, the aim would sort of be the heroic dose, which Terence McKenna has termed it that way, and that would be 5 dried grams of mushrooms. And the point there would be to sit with it yourself alone and let it show you what it will show you. So to not necessarily interact with the sensory world, but to simply be alone with it. You might call it a meditation, if you will, but it is simply taking all the other variables out of the equation, sitting behind closed eyes and experiencing that it is truly a gateway out of this dimension into other worlds of beauty, of order, of coherence, and intelligence itself. And after interacting with that, you will not come back the same person. However, you will come back to your base level consciousness, most likely, unless there's some sort of underlying issue there, mental case or something like that. But you would probably know that by the time you got into your 30s or so. So anyhow, you do come back a changed person fundamentally because you've got new information, but it is changed in, at least in my experience, the best of ways, showing you what you need to do to propel yourself forward in the world, be of your highest and best use, and then of service to your fellow man in that way.
So if you and I are, let's say you have a date and I have a date, right? And we both go to this little restaurant, but our dates stand us up. And I'm like, so we go to the bar. You're sitting next to me at the bar. I'm like, what do you do? And you tell me, like, hey, I write books, yada, yada, yada. I go, that's interesting, but I don't know. I know absolutely nothing about what you're talking about. How would you explain it to me?
In that case, I would simply make it a call to adventure thing. Because, again, my particular path happens to be the psychedelic exploration and such. But I would say, like, the other half of all of my writing is recognizing the blueprints that are universally true, which comprise the hero's journey. So we all have this in our life. We all have our calls to adventure. As you were saying earlier, sometimes just from being born in a certain area of the country or whatever, you're going to have certain models that are based upon that environment, certain worldviews. But then you need to update those in order to grow, to move on in the world. And I would say that this is the process we all have to be engaged in. Otherwise, you're degrading. And you don't want to do that. So you need to be ordering the unknown in order to move on. So I would just say take those calls to adventure when you see them or hear them, and be open to moving into the unknown with the knowledge that you will be able to work it out. It might not be a smooth or seamless process. In fact, it won't be. I can say that for sure. It's going to be rocky because you're not going to know the new rules until you get out there and start bumping into boundaries. But you have to take those calls. You really do. I think if you recognize them, to say no is to say no to evolutionary growth itself, which is a term that I flip-flop with love interchangeably. So if you're to say no to love, what are you engaging? Fear, which is its opposite. And what do you want to live in, love or fear? I think that's simple.
You know, you got me wondering and thinking here. So when you go into this dimension, many of the people that I have encountered who are on similar journeys, they really talk about love, and they keep running into love. But I know energetically, for every energy level, there's a different one on the scale. So if we put everything from 1 to 100, love is 100, right? Mm-hmm. What's at 1? Or is that present? Do you encounter that? Or is that what we're encountering in our earth consciousness day to day?
Yeah, that's a funny part at the end of that. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. The way that I frame that is similar to light. You know, you got love and light, and of course those are energy, right? So it's a telling analogy, I think, in many ways. And then so you would say the opposite polarity of love or light would be fear or darkness, I suppose. But the interesting thing about that is it's not necessarily a thing in and of itself. It's just the lack of that light, right? So darkness is the lack of the presence of light, period. Or even if you think about temperature, like something cold is the vibratory energy of that particular state not moving as fast as it would when it's hot. But it's not a separate thing in and of itself. So love does seem to be what is there, the light, and then something that is not that is just removed light to some degree.
It's just a scale.
Yeah, it's like the scale like you were saying, and that's, I think, about as simple as that whole thing breaks down. I suppose the way that I was talking about love is something like evolutionary growth. Like that which you find propels you forward in the world, which is good for you and your fellow man and adds to your understanding of the world at large and what you could do for your fellow man. And this is, I think, the point. This is like an evolutionary process of growth and order. And again, I think that that's this force you want to embody as much as is possible in your own life. It will look different for each and every one of us, of course, but that process seems universally true.
Last question. What did you see?
Specifically?
Yes.
Oh, man. Well, the infinity symbol I mentioned was probably one of the most prominent visuals that I'd ever taken away from the state. Of course, there's a lot that goes on in there, and it's impossible to remember or bring back everything. But to, I think, the heart of the question, I'll just give you my last experience. I went to camp out in the desert here in Texas not too terribly long ago, just to unplug from that matrix. As you were talking about, I was working a regular job at the time. I was a cargo pilot. I actually just quit this past week. But anyhow, it was busy season. This was this past November, and I just needed to recharge. So I took a week off of work. I went out to the desert in solitude, back roads, away from everyone. And for the most part, I was just connecting with nature. That's what I did to start this vision quest. I had no intention necessarily of even using the mushroom in this case. I just wanted to feel it out and see if I heard that call, right? And the whole thing definitely unveiled itself to me as I was there. And eventually I heard the call to take 8 grams dried of mushrooms. That infinity symbol seemed to represent itself to me many times throughout the vision quest. Sometimes, moments after I asked for a sign from the universe, it would be shown to me in a rock or a tree or something like this. So anyway, I dove in hard with it, and there was a lot that was learned from the experience. It seemed like, though, in a nutshell, the essence of life, it was telling me, is something like a classroom, and it's truly that. And if there is any point to the classroom, it is to sculpt and complexify your consciousness, your awareness, and to expand into higher orders of love. It was almost, though, saying that love is not just something to do because it feels good, or even just because it's this process of growth, but it was kind of telling me, like, that's the evolutionary intelligent strategy. It's the best way to expand, to move on. It's just what life does naturally. And like back to your love question, if you're not engaging in that process, you're just removed from that natural impulse or essence or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then that would be degrees removed from love, which surely we could call darkness or fear. So to be avoided when recognized. But anyway, more specifically, in that whole situation, I also saw the power of human will itself. And it more or less was describing to me that your will is able to, in the right circumstances, literally bend the laws of physics. And that when you have no one else around you to tell you that what is happening is not true, it seems true enough to you. Like, for example, I was willing that I had a breeze come into my tent to cool me off in this hot desert afternoon. And at least at the time, I convinced myself that to the degree my will was pressed upon reality, I got a little breeze, cooled me down. So, in a nutshell, I'll say that that was my last exploration, and if I seen anything from it, it was to use will in order to line it up with evolutionary love. And again, this will look different for every traveler, but it's a universally true and strategically beneficial process to move not only yourself on, but hopefully the collective as well.
So I lied. That wasn't the last question.
Sorry if that one went on.
No, it's good. Because you did touch upon this in something that I was looking at, which is free will. And it's funny is because, particularly in the United States, many people are giving up their free will for comfort. I see it all the time. People want something, and I'm like, go take care of it yourself. You can think this into it. I've thought up things, and when I connected it with emotion, it showed up. Like I wanted something, like I want a piece of cake. There's no emotion attached to it. Or I want to change my life, and I'm going to change it so freaking bad. Like you feel it in your chakra, you feel it in your solar plexus, and then it's gone. And then you stop thinking about it, and then all of a sudden it shows up, and you're like, why did that show up versus these other things that I asked? And then you realize if you've done it a few times, there was an emotion attached to it. You know, with the will and emotion, that's, for me, the soup. What were your takes on free will? Because I know you've spoken about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I'll just say on the law of attraction stuff, basically, that's spectacular. I have talked to people who have implemented it and worked it out successfully, and I think that's great. I myself never have been able to rock that exactly, but I know exactly the formula you're talking about. You have
it's
a thought.
Difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a thought, you want to press an emotion into it, and then feel as though the thing has already happened. That seems to be key, too, to that type of prayer. That's spectacular. I'd like to learn more about that, obviously, because I haven't been able to really put it to work in my life. But free will itself, to get to the heart of the question there, I do think is absolutely prime to three-dimensional existence. I cannot get around that. And I know there are people out there selling evidence that it doesn't exist. I don't see it. I think it is one of those things that is so self-evident that you could question it. But that doesn't mean there's value to questioning it. It has seemed to me, and it has been shown to me as well by some of these visionary plants, that free will is prime to three-dimensional existence. You might make the argument that it's not prime absolutely. So, for example, like in some of these psychedelic spaces, you can get to a point of single-pointed awareness or something like that, if you will, just pure consciousness, the seer of all seers. That might not require free will, or perhaps free will isn't necessarily a part of that. It's just pure consciousness. However, that's not where we spend the majority of our time. We're here with our boots on this ground, on Earth. And as such, if it is a classroom, we have to exercise our free will to make certain decisions and learn what to do next based upon the coherent feedback that we get from this structure. There are rules. There is a natural law that seems to be in play. So we can learn, we can grow, and we can move on. And I would say that is encapsulated within that infinite symbol. It is intelligence, and we are representations of it.
Well, awesome. This is interesting. I could question and talk to you for hours, but I have a time limit. So, John, I want to thank you so much for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast.
Thank you, my friend. I totally appreciate it. Like I said, this really is like my favorite thing to do. My entree, if you will, is just conversation. So thank you. This is great.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, you are a billionaire, but I need you to get right. And, you know, I realized something when I had this experience, that particularly in these puritanical countries, these colonized countries, we have been programmed away from just the meat bag, which is your body. You know, we've been trained to see our bodies as shameful. We have been trained to see, and if you say that about your body, you say it about yourself. We've trained to think of it in singular dimensions, which is like bodies are for manipulating and sex. So I need you to get away from that, because that is your God body. We are human beings. We are people who are directly affected by the sun, which gives us our color, which gives us our hue. We are in the image of man, which is this entity that we all kind of share traits with. here's where we get twisted, where the programming comes. It's the being part. I need you to step away, and here's how you can start with that. The next time you go into the bathroom and you take a shower or bath and you get out, leave your towel on the floor and don't cover your God body, your human being body. And I need you to get into the mirror and look at all your naughty bits and your flappy arms and all this stuff, because all the other animals, that's how they exist, except for us. We are covering ourselves mentally, spiritually, and physically, and we don't even know it. You have to get back to the basics of loving yourself. Sit and look in the mirror and don't compare, because no one can make you. No one can replicate you as you are. So you got to begin to love what's there already. Get close to the mirror. Look into the eye that's looking back at you, because it is like a nebulae in the sky, as above, so below. Notice the change. Notice all that is you. And when you meet another one who has a nebulae in their eye, like the one in the sky, as above, so below, treat them with love, honor, and respect. So next time, love you all. Peace.